Hey everybody, this is Perch, and I got a question, an email saying, "Hey, how do you feel about all these the people who are making fun of or celebrating the job loss, the people who are being basically being laid off or fired or whatever it happens to be from DC? How do you feel about that?" And to that, I would answer, "Sir, this is a comic book channel. Not, no, I'm just kidding." Um, the 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 short answer is this is. I mean, I don't know. Maybe the really short answer is it's up to you. It's your opinion if you want to celebrate that or not celebrate it, and it's really how you feel is how you feel. At the end of the day, I think if I was to get on here and say you need to feel this way or that way, I don't know. It'd be a pretty douchey thing to do. So, at the end of the day, you gotta just be yourself. You gotta decide kind of what you celebrate, what you don't, and maybe not beat yourself up too much about it if you feel one way or another. I mean, how you feel is how you feel. I think it is kind of the nature of where we are. It's the nature of how social media engines and everything else has driven us. There's kind of this there's this a number of shows about social networks and what they do to people, and then it was summarized fairly well in the Death to 2020, this comedy special that Netflix did, which is all just kind of making fun of everything. It's funny though how the indicator of where we are as a society and as a system is that I'm seeing the reactions to this Netflix special, which pretty much takes the piss out on everything. However, it everybody looks at that and they view it through their lens, and they're angry about the parts where they're getting attacked. Like I'm seeing people just rolling on the floor laughing at like the Karen portrayal woman who's maybe racist or not maybe racist but is racist is kind of the parody of a lot of the racism issues that hit the country. But they're completely like they don't like any of the cancel culture portrayal. Like the show went too far there. It's like everybody kind of picks and chooses what they want to find hilarious and be offended by, and it's a wonderful world we live in. At any rate, you you know I don't celebrate people losing their jobs. And keep in mind, with job loss here, we're talking fired and there's layoffs. And most of what we've seen, the vast majority of what we've seen, are layoffs. There's very few actual firings happening. And you could say, oh, those are about the same thing, but they're not really. There's a bunch of both legal issues around whether you're fired or you're laid off, how it impacts your unemployment, and also, the challenge that I have is that a lot of the people who are getting laid off are to some extent hapless victims. And what I mean by that is, let's say for the moment, let's accept the premise that the big two, the DC and Marvel or whatever, let's just say DC. Let's say that some of the people at DC, or and let's put a name on it. Let's say Tom King. Okay, so Tom King says, "Don't buy my comic book if you like Trump." Or Tom King says, "Hey, these people over here on Twitter, they're hateful Nazi people, and they're bad." Well, here we are, and Tom King still has a job. He's still working, and there's a bunch of kind of letterers, colorists, random kind of associate editors who nobody has heard of. I mean, that's the crazy part of this is the majority of people who have been laid off you've never heard of, and you've never heard of because they're not big names. They don't have Twitter accounts, or if they do, they don't really post anything there. And those are the people, by and large, getting laid off. It's DC lays off Bob Harris, and we want to celebrate it, but why? Like, does anybody know what Bob Harris does? Like, what's funny is when Bob Harris, funny is the wrong word, but when Bob Harris loses his job, and he's laid off at DC, people are like, this is what you get for calling your customers Nazis. Except Bob Harris didn't do any of that stuff. I mean, I think you could look at that and say, hey, Bob Harris, you finally got what's coming to you after pretty much driving Chris Claremont off the X-Men and making a bunch of terrible decisions that pretty much wrecked and dented that whole line. Hey, you placated a bunch of talent that immediately then left you for more money and wound up kind of destroying kind of your own golden goose and, and a bunch of profits in comics. No, 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 no. That's not what's being said. What's being said is, hey, you called some customers Nazis, and so you deserve to get laid off. Except he didn't do any of those things, and by and large, the people who are doing those things, they still got their jobs just fine. I mean, that's the part that I feel like it's misplaced anger, and that's why I think celebrating when people lose their jobs, it's not for me. I'll put it that way. It's not for me. Now, I'm not sitting here empathetic like, oh my God, this is a disaster. What are we going to do? I think that there's some people who have reached out, old friends of mine. I've pointed them at some places that are hiring, and I hope they can get their jobs. I will serve as a reference if I need to. If people ever want me to do that, happy to do it. And I'll continue to help people out, as they get affected by this. But I think there's, by the same token, if somebody is doing a bad job, I don't think you keep them around simply because it's the holidays or it's quote unquote the right thing to do. It's not the right thing to do. In fact, that's kind of the whole problem when people do a bad job, and not to pick on the guy too much. It's, there's a lot of other factors here, but when Bob Harris made decisions that got Chris Claremont off of Uncanny X-Men and put Jim Lee in more control, even though Jim Lee was not really even asking for it. And then Jim Lee proceeds to go off and do his work on Image, and the X titles went through a bunch of crap. I think that you don't keep rewarding Bob Harris by just giving him more work. You at some point you're like, hey, you're not suited for this job. Maybe you've been promoted to a level of management that is wrong. Maybe the decisions you make, have consequences. They're bad decisions. So you don't just keep people employed because that's what you do. That's kind of the problem with the comic industry in general. Is a lot of people have just kept their jobs who shouldn't, because they're not good at those jobs. And forget what people are saying on Twitter or whatever else. That is, I don't say irrelevant, but it becomes almost irrelevant with just doing your job badly. It's like, hey, whoever's in the marketing department at DC, you've got a huge comic launch in March. Like, stop screwing that up. It's like, hey, we end these programs to incentivize retailers to take out local advertising, and then they ended the program without communicating any of that to retailers. And then, like, Jimenez was basically contacting people on the side to get them paid because nobody bothered to communicate this out anywhere. And it's like, yeah, that's incompetence, and that will cost you your job. You don't just keep people employed for the goodness of the season when they're not good at their jobs. But at the same time, and any big corporation or company will tell you this, you don't sit and take pleasure at the fact that you're firing somebody. That makes you a sociopath. That makes you nuts. Yeah, even if the person wronged you, the correct answer is get those people out of the picture, get them, stop the bleeding, stop letting their incompetence potentially take down the whole ship. That's a fairly emotionless process. At least when it works well, it is. Having a delight and a party over people getting fired it's what, for me. Okay, again, your mileage may vary. For me, it's misplaced emotion. It's energy I don't want to spend, particularly in somebody who's going away. Like, why would I continue to throw any kind of time, energy, or effort behind people going away, even particularly for people who wronged me in some fashion? I don't have that DNA, and I know it again. Everybody's a little bit different. No shame. You feel how you feel, right? But it's I never have seen the point in continuing to invest effort and energy and attention into things that are bad. Like, if and it maybe, again, this is just my personality. When I detect something is negative for me, my goal is to cut it out of my life as fast as humanly possible. I view it as like it's a virus, and I want to get rid of that virus and move on. And dwelling on that virus, continuing to sink energy into it, to me is like I get, I don't know, it's like an obsessive compulsive behavior. I start to feel just edgy, like, hey, I need to get this thing out of me. I need to get away from this thing as fast as possible. And any additional time dwelling on this is just, it's opening me up for more virus. Like get it gone. That's how I view it. And you know, again, your mileage may vary. My my answer is, you know, ultimately at the end of the day, if there's a problem, you should try and correct it. If you're not in a position to correct it, and that's, I think, the position that a lot of people find themselves with these situations is they, you know, they're fans. They're fans or customers that feel like they were wronged, and some of the people that wronged them are, you know, losing their jobs, and it's a time to celebrate the fact that like justice was served. That's I think the mentality of a lot of people, and I get it. I do get it. I think anyone who says that doesn't make any sense, they're you know they're kidding themselves. You know, it makes sense if you feel like you're wronged, and then the person who wronged you suddenly, you know, bad fate falls upon them. It feels good. It feels like justice was restored. That's a perfectly reasonable kind of human emotion. It's just not one I think you dwell on too long. You know, feel good that the universe has righted itself for you on some level, and then get on with your life. I think that's again, it is all about what you want to do. It's sinking a lot of time and energy into something that pays nothing back for you. And the other part, I think, then this is the big sticking point with me, particularly with a lot of these recent announcements from DC and everything else. Just like, are the people who wronged you, are they really the people that are getting the brunt of all this? If you're an office, for lack of a better word, drone at DC, you're an assistant editor who's just like doing their thing. They again, no social media account, no dog in this hunt at all. In fact, in many cases, probably just as irritated by their job. You know how many editors I've heard from, and it's funny because I heard secondhand through other people this was going on in the last, I'd say, month. I've just heard a lot of these stories firsthand. The amount of people at DC who were so irritated at Bendis because of poor communication and just not treating people, not being treated very well, all the rest. And those are the people who are, you know, by and large, a lot of them were laid off. You know, there's several people who probably felt the same way as a lot of customers felt about this guy. Meanwhile, Bendis is on Justice League. So when we're going, yay, like did the quote unquote did the right people really get impacted by this that we're all happy about? I mean, I don't know. I mean, just make sure if you're throwing a party, the right people are invited to it. Do you know what I mean? Or don't throw the party at all because it's a waste of your time. Anyway, my perspective. I hope that answered your question. I don't know. I don't have that DNA. I always feel like the best revenge is success. So if I'm having success, if I'm happy in my life, these people don't live in my head. Then I feel like I'm doing pretty well, and I've beaten the enemy, so to speak. Anyway, what about you? There you go. And sir, this is a comic channel. Hey, like, subscribe, follow me on social media, do what you need to do. Thanks for listening.